What's up guys, Kudokun here. I've been getting stuff ready for my Pokemon Sword and Shield review, and that got me thinking about the history of Pokemon up to this point. Like most people in their late 20s, I've been a Pokemon fan my entire life. I almost feel like it grew up alongside me. Pokemon has seen a lot of changes and innovations over the years. In a way, it's almost evolving like it's a Pokemon itself. So today, I thought it would be a fun little project to get together my top 10 favorite Pokemon games of all time and share them with you. By this point, we should all know how the Pokemon formula works. You find monsters, catch monsters, fight other monsters, and you follow some kind of story progression to the end of the game. The gameplay itself challenging you to find the best monsters for the right situations. I think the secret to a good Pokemon game becoming a great Pokemon game is breaking away from that formula and finding a way to innovate. So in order for a Pokemon game to have made my top 10 list, it has to have done something unique and innovative to break away from the regular Pokemon format. But that's enough talking out of me. Grab your balls and spin your hats backwards. It's time for Kudokun's top 10 Pokemon games of all time. Let's catch 'em all. Number 10. Stalkers was the first and potentially only Pokemon game released for the Sega Dreamcast, which is sadly why a lot of people probably don't remember it. Bits of different worlds are being trapped in an alternate dimension, and it's up to you and a small handful of other Pokemon trainers to stop it. The game is a roguelike, meaning every time you enter the dungeon, the layout will be completely different, and you'll start at level 1. However, any items or Pokemon you collect will be kept with you at the end of the dungeon. While the idea of a roguelike Pokemon game might turn some people off, I'd still highly recommend the game if you can get your hands on it. The game is balanced to perfection, and the characters are so witty and likable you might stay just to continue seeing their dialogue. For those who don't know, the Dreamcast memory cards were their own little handheld gaming units, and the coolest thing about the interaction between this and Stalkers is you could take the Pokemon you collect and actually take them with you and play handheld games with them. Nintendo would later steal this idea for one of their Pokemon games, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, and call it the Pokewalker. Though oddly enough, the Stalkers version of this idea would have a lot more features. Huh, that's kinda weird. Number 9. Lost Magic is a magic-based Pokemon game that came out early in the DS's lifespan. In this game, you fight alongside your Pokemon using a rather robust spellcasting system. The bottom screen acts as a sort of magic tablet that you use to draw runes representing different elements. The game has a crazy amount of spells for you to discover and experiment with, and even multiple endings. The story isn't really anything to write home about, and the game doesn't hold up quite as well as I'd like it to, but if you can ever get your hands on it, it is a fun experience, and I do recommend it. Fun fact! Did you know that this was one of the first ever Pokemon RPGs to have online playability? It's true! Sure, the matches were laggy as all hell and it was filled with spammers, but I managed to have fun with it. Monster Hunter Stories was a rather strange crossover between Pokemon and Monster Hunter that came out not too long ago on the 3DS. Sadly, the game wasn't very well received by fans, but I thought it was rather enjoyable. Sure, it does lack a little bit of depth, but as you can probably see, what it lacks in depth it more than makes up for in charm and humor. Like most Pokemon games, it's a rather simple RPG that just about anybody can pick up and enjoy, regardless of whether or not you're a Monster Hunter fan. Though if you are a Monster Hunter fan, there are some nods and winks here that you'll be sure to appreciate. And it's a great time seeing how much personality some of these monsters can have. Don't go in looking for a deep, well-crafted narrative, but if you are just looking for a fun little adventure to get your mind off of things for a bit, Kudokun approves Monster Hunter Stories. Number 7. Yeesh, speaking of not being well received, Yokai Watch will probably be the most divisive thing on this list. As you can see, Yokai Watch was a game that focused mainly on ghost Pokemon, or yokai as they're also known in this world. It failed to capture very many fans out here in the West, but I do happen to be one of the fans it caught. Some of the main criticisms for the game are that 1, it's extremely corny, which I completely understand. The game is probably the corniest of the Pokemon series. And 2, that you're not actually selecting your Pokemon's moves in battle. This is a criticism I've never really understood or gotten behind. It's not like you're sitting and doing nothing during these battles, you're just not selecting the exact moves that they're using. Sure, the yokai do move and attack on their own, but I don't see what would have been added to battles if they had constantly stopped the battles to bring up menus for you to sort through. But alas, we all know how some Pokemon fans can get over unique and inventive ideas that aren't exactly like every other game in the series. Some gamers are just set in their ways, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with knowing what you want. If you were turned off by Yokai Watch early on due to the lukewarm reception, there's a great new game coming out for the Switch pretty soon. It looks like it's full of fun gameplay and fresh new ideas, so Pokemon fans will probably hate it, but hey, if you have a chance, maybe check out the demo on the Switch store. Number 6. Mechabots was a huge departure for the Pokemon series, as now all of the Pokemon are robots. Instead of evolution, you can now switch your Pokemon's parts out to give them different attacks. What's interesting about this is you can actually see all of the parts on your Pokemon in real time, so you can make some pretty cool looking designs. Battles use a sort of active time battle system like the early Final Fantasies. After selecting a move, your Pokemon starts moving towards the center. The first Pokemon to hit the center gets to use their move first. Their move speed is determined by the move that you selected, and your attacks will aim for certain parts of the opposing Pokemon's body. When certain parts are destroyed, it severely limits you in battle, such as taking away certain moves, taking away certain stats, or, in the case of your head and body, destroys you directly. I wish there was a little more control over what parts you actually got to target, but at the same time, if you could just target the head over and over again, it would probably make for a pretty boring experience. If you're looking for something more actiony, there was an arena battle game that came out around the same time. While I do personally like the RPG series more, this was a pretty great game too. The series is still alive and well in Japan, but sadly we haven't gotten a new game in over a decade. But the stuff that we did get was still pretty great. Number 5. Oh man, Monster Rancher was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The way that you get new Pokemon in this game is you put different discs into your console. Yes, actual discs, as in DVDs and other games. One of my fondest memories with the series is when my friends and I put in the SpongeBob movie DVD and the game told us that the monster it would summon is so powerful that I just wasn't strong enough to have it. From then on, the running joke became that there was like a god monster hidden in the SpongeBob DVD. This added a whole new level to collecting games for the PS1, because every time you got a new game, you also wondered what monster could be on it, and you would put it into Monster Rancher to find out. The Pokemon design and the battle system are serviceable, they're pretty okay for the most part. It's mainly watching your Pokemon battle, but unlike Yokai Watch, there's not a whole lot of interactivity. In fact, if it weren't for the novelty of summoning Pokemon from DVDs and old games, then it might not even be on the list. But it does have the novelty, so it is on the list. Sadly, we'll probably never see an idea like this executed ever again. Digital games are taking over, and there's a lot of ways to cheat the system nowadays. Plus, programming a feature like this for PS4 games and Blu-ray discs sounds like an absolute nightmare. But we did have it once, and if you have a PS1 or a PS2 and you can find a copy of this game, I'd recommend checking it out. And if you do, and you have the SpongeBob DVD lying around somewhere, please tell me what was on that disc. Number 4. So, there's really not a whole lot to say about Temtem. All memes aside, it's just a really solid Pokemon experience for the PC. It's got MMO elements, so you'll be running into plenty of other players. The designs, while not super great, are at least pretty good, especially on the Temtems themselves. Overall, it's just a really solid PC game for Pokemon fans. It's not perfect, it's got plenty of flaws, but it's also pretty good. Yeah, I don't really have any jokes. If you haven't checked it out already, maybe give it a look. I suppose if I did have to point something out on the matter, Verlisify hates this game, meaning it's probably one of the greatest games ever made, and I cannot recommend it hard enough. Number 3. If you're looking for a slightly darker Pokemon game to play and you've already played the GameCube titles to death, might I recommend Shin Megami Tensei. The Pokemon in these games are based mainly around folklore and religious symbols. From the first time I picked up a Shin Megami Tensei game, these little digital devils have stolen my heart. They really personify what I love about video games. What makes games in this Pokemon series stand out is you don't just beat the Pokemon half to death and then trap them in tiny balls. You really have to hack the soul of the Pokemon that you want and find out what it really wants from you. Another standout feature is your strange journeys through the apocalyptic worlds of the Shin Megami Tensei series can be rather challenging. If you ever make the rather innocent sin of setting these games to their hardest difficulty, you're in for some eternal punishment. But if you do feel like overclocking the game's difficulty and fighting these shadows of the labyrinth at their strongest, you're in for a rewarding experience. If you have yet to jump into a Digital Devil's story, then I imagine these games will have you dancing all night. Number 2. You know, I don't think I'll ever understand why this game gets such a meh response from people. Pokemon World of Final Fantasy is another strange crossover featuring Pokemon and Final Fantasy. To me, the game is a perfect blend of adorableness, great gameplay, fun and witty characters, a cool story to follow, and also really fun Pokemon collecting. Once again, your goal isn't just to beat Pokemon half to death in this game, it's actually to meet some kind of requirement in battle. The game gives you plenty of tools to let you know just how many Pokemon are left in an area to catch and what your requirements for catching the Pokemon are. Sure, it can be a little annoying when there's a Pokemon you want to catch that needs a requirement that you can't fill, like attacking it with a certain attack or being able to survive a certain hit, but that just gives you reasons to come back and catch them later. There's a slew of Pokemon to collect, and the game is just so visually appealing and funny to me that I never got bored. It's also pretty funny to see your favorite Final Fantasy characters in a Pokemon universe. Seriously, Chibi Lightning is like the cutest thing in the world. The battle system's pretty revamped too. It centers around building teams of 3, a small character, a medium character, and a large character. The two main characters can switch their size between small and large, so it gives a lot of gameplay variety. This game, like previous Pokemon games, challenges you to find the best Pokemon for the right areas and situations, so you'll never get bored with experimenting. The game has a lot of content too, especially now that it's been released for every console under the sun. Seriously, I will not be surprised at this point if there's a Game Boy port coming next summer. But there's a beefy story with, again, very likable characters, and there's a lot of side content to explore too. For my money, I think PC or Switch would be the best consoles to get it for, but yeah, get it for whatever you have or you like. If you're looking for a new Pokemon experience, treat yourself to the world of Final Fantasy. And finally, number 1. Okay guys, I have a small confession to make. This game at my number 1 spot is not going to be a Pokemon game. Rather than choosing a game from the Pokemon series, I'm going to choose a game with Pokemon-like elements, where you do things like capture and battle monsters. Hopefully these other 9 games from the Pokemon series will be enough to satisfy you, because again, I want to stress that this next title will not be a Pokemon game, just a game with Pokemon-like elements. So pretty much the entire Digimon franchise could go here at the number 1 spot, but I am going to put Digimon Cybersleuth here because I feel like if you're going to get into a Digimon game right now, it is still the best starting point. There are some things that I feel Digimon does just better than Pokemon when it comes to the video gaming world, and even if you're a huge Pokemon fan, I'd like it if you could hear me out on why I think so. Okay, so the first thing is going to be gameplay variation. When you go to pick up a new Digimon game, it's probably going to be an all-new Digimon game, with some new Digimon, some new areas to explore, and of course, new gameplay. As terrified as fans are of the battle system ever changing in a Pokemon game, I think if the Pokemon Company were allowed to try a new variation of the Pokemon battle system, it would end up being for the better. Secondly, I think I like Digivolutions a bit more than I like Pokemon evolutions. In Digimon games, all Digimon have multiple paths that they can go towards for Digivolution, rather than just the one you get in Pokemon. It makes raising Digimon a little bit more fun, because if you want a slightly tankier version of the Digimon that you have, you can just increase its HP and defense and then potentially turn it into something that's a bit tankier. Or if you want something with a bit more power behind it, you can just increase its power stats and it'll go into a Digivolution that has more powerful stats. Some Digimon will have like 5 or 6 different things they can turn into, and the game does a really great job of making it clear what you have to do to get those Digivolutions, and it also gives you the power to revert Digimon back to older Digivolutions so that you can take them down different paths if you don't like what you currently have. Seriously, if you get off on filling out a Pokédex, try a Digimon game and fill out a Digivolution chart. I'm telling you, you're gonna have a blast. Another thing that probably goes without saying is Digimon games normally have a much better story than Pokemon games. I don't think even the biggest Pokemon fan in the world will ever argue that Pokemon games are great because of their story. Admittedly, Pokemon games tend to have much better characters, mainly due to their design or their mannerisms, but they don't normally do anything within the story itself that's very memorable outside of some notable examples. This is the point that most Pokemon fans will probably tell me that they don't need story to be in their Pokemon, but here's the point that I'm trying to make. If a game does everything that Pokemon does slightly better and also has a good story on top of it, it deserves some praise for being able to have a good story. Just because you don't need it doesn't mean it wouldn't be nice if it were there. If a Pokemon game did come out with a good story, it's not like these people would say, "Aw man, I hate the Pokemon has a good story now." I could probably talk for hours about this, but I guess the last thing I'll mention are the graphics, and I mean, do I really have to sit here and spell out how the graphics in a Pokemon game can be improved? I'll just take a moment and let you watch the gameplay in the back here. And before you get on my case about Pokemon being on the Switch and thus having inferior hardware, I'd like to remind you that this game is out on the Switch, and it comes in a double pack with its sequel. And don't tell anyone I told you this, but you can get both games on one cartridge on the Switch for cheaper than you can get Pokemon Sword and Shield. Boy howdy, we sure had a lot of fun today, didn't we, Pokemon fans? Even if you disagree with some of the stuff I said, I hope you enjoyed the video. And I'm sure that because Pokemon fans are very respectful of other people's opinions and can take obvious jokes very, very well, that I won't be getting a bunch of negativity in my comments. Because, boy, it sure would be embarrassing to be the person who gets upset over the criticisms or jokes made in a video like this, I tell ya. But hey, if you enjoyed the video, please leave it a like. Those things really do help us out. If you have any thoughts on the video you'd like to share, leave them in the comment section below, along with anything else you'd like to see me cover. And finally, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudo news. And if you want to prove you made it to the end of the video, leave me your favorite Pokemon game in the comment section below. Catch you next time!